to dedicate this to Pat Jenks. I did not know she passed, but her mother's books were very instrumental in what I'm going to show you today. And my story today is no way exclusive to know everything about what's in these books. So if you ever want to read more about them, they're available over at the other museum. And so with that, I'm going to play something here, which I had intended to play at the end of the show, but because of technical difficulties, we will play it first.
Because you don't know what he's doing.
Turn it back on again. As Bonnie said, you were already light and lively today, but I'm going to try to make it even better. This is the Larry Bush Band from Cuba City, Wisconsin. My friend Dale is their relative. I sat there at the Lafayette County Fair last July and recorded them doing this, and Dale and I were there and became acquainted with the Larry Bush Band. And this dancing couple here happens to be the best friends of the veterinarians where my wife works. So that was kind of special too. And so the next opportunity you might have to hear them in person is they're trying to get scheduled in at the Onward Art Center. I recorded you. Can I send it to? So now I was going to start this program, and I will. And it's also, I wanted to play that through, sorry it took so long, but I wanted to remind you that Roger Miller came from Clarinda, Iowa, and he never came home in World War II, and he's a World War veteran, World War II, and I just thought that was respectful for his service, that he was born yesterday. So this clip are the artifacts that we have in the museum over at the fairgrounds. And I couldn't, of course, bring the artifacts with me here today, so you can see what's available as far as the cream separator, the butter churn, and the associated paraphernalia that went along with the many creameries in Jackson County. And here you see on the wall in the back of the museum, you have the Spragueville Cooperative Creamery, which I did not include in this presentation, but will at a later date. And I was just amazed as to small items you have there included about the dairy industry. So important to Jackson County.
And we need to thank Pat Gent for all of the beautiful work that she did, because these are her exhibits.
This
that
was
she-
Pat Gent's ability to put this together. And so again, this is for Pat. And again, there are some more in the wall there. Miner's Creamery is not in today's presentation. There wasn't a time for it, but it's listed. You can see the Hayes Brothers Dairy. That was their containers. We would go door to door and put the milk in the community of Maquoketa and other communities. The other one is for Sanitary Dairy, which was, as I understand, to be what was the Jorgensen Dairy. When they sold it, Sanitary operated it in Maquoketa and Clinton. And you can see the steel milk cans. And I carried a few of those in my younger days. My dad had the old production. When he had milk cans, he carried 17 milk cans up a flight of stairs to put those into the can cooler. So this brings back a lot of memories for me. And of course, I already mentioned these two books by Pat's mother, Velma Teeple. And I just learned last night that these two books are also available online at the University of Iowa Library. But what I didn't know, as of even last night, was that the Buckhorn Creamery had an issue of the Wallace's Farmer back in 1922. And I couldn't get, of course, the whole page on one screen so it was readable. But I do have one part of it to read, that Frank Worth, the president of this association, always milks quite a few cows as feature of his extensive farming operation. And then it tells more of Chris Werner, the vice president, and many general farmers who have not staked everything on dairying. And the Buckhorn Creamery started in 1899, and basically it was the first cooperative in Iowa to market milk or butter. And all of these individual farmers, I think maybe 15, put up a $200 investment to build that Buckhorn Creamery. I was visiting with my good friend Ruth Wilson a week ago or so, and in her mother's scrapbook she had this story that was in a newspaper in Maquoketa. Well, then I did a little more research on that clipping and found that in your museum you have that picture. And so that was the original Buckhorn Creamery, and the farmers who buy horse and horseless carriage got their milk or cream to the Buckhorn Creamery. And so here I let you see who the actual farmers are in this. And this is the story. For identification, Carl Hinkleman stood in front of the car. And Frank Worth, Leroy Worth's father, who again was the president of the association, was the man driving the car. And standing to the rear of the car, way standing up, that's Henry Bush, which we've mentioned him before in different presentations, but that's Alice Mann and Ruth and Margaret Burrichter's great-grandfather. And Leroy Worth could not identify the man in the left rear, but August Lutt was the man on the right rear. Back there. Can't see his face. And we'll come back to August Lutt in a few minutes. I'll read the bottom paragraph. And those horses and mule rigs comprise the transportation for getting the cans of cream to the creamery. Being one of the creamer's many haulers in those days meant throwing the harness on a team in the wee hours of the morning, miles after miles of mud roads and clay hills in the summer, and a bobsled over unplowed snow in the winter. No heater, but a buffalo robe. So that was quite an adventure just to get your milk product to a creamery to produce income for your family. And then we have this picture quite a few years later when Buckhorn Creamery got established, when they hired and paid drivers of their vehicles to go get the cans of milk on the farms in a 5-county area. They picked up milk from Jackson, Clinton, Jones, Scott, and Cedar County. There were 9 routes every other day picking up those cans. And here we had an article in the newspaper, or it was an advertisement, and in this, one of these books was the ad, and it told who was in the picture. Paul Merrick, Ed Merrick, Harry Stanton, Groves Prost, Wayne Lufford, Sam Snowberger, Hans Scott, John Reynolds, Walter Proust, Jim Snowberger, Robert Worden, and Earl Carey. Well, the interesting thing was that this ad was already published in 2000. But then in 2011, Kelly Gerlach from the local paper put in this story that they were looking to know who the identification of those men were. Well, if she had come to the museum, she would have found it in these books. I thought that was kind of interesting. And so the 3 men that I pictured very blurrily, they are Hans Jorgensen, Elvin Jorgensen, and Elroy Jorgensen. Hans and Sophie Jorgensen operated the Jorgensen's Dairy on Summer Street for a number of years. So there will be more about them here very shortly. But this is where it started. It started at the Buckhorn Creamery. And here we have Hans Jorgensen and Hans Scott, good friends, and they already had made a Guernsey Calf Club and a Holstein Calf Club to see that the dairy farmers would encourage their children to keep up in their same line of work in milking cows. And that is quite an inspiration. A father or a member of your community take you by the hand and show you the ropes of raising that baby calf to a mature cow, to milking the cow, and delivering the product to the consumer. And I couldn't help but relate this story that I found in the book. Actually, it's in this one, where all these children had put on a dancing routine by a Odette Keene studio in Maquoketa. And of those children, my dad's sister won the tap dancing contest at the age of 7. This is Bonnie Jo Scott. She was my dad's youngest sister, but raised by my dad's aunt and uncle, and she became Bonnie Jo Marks from Goose Lake. And so the Buckhorn Creamery grew and grew. It had to build a new building onto the creamery in, I'm not sure what year, but you can see that it's extensively a lot of money at that time, $125,000. And because of that expansion, it led their business to be a multi-million-dollar industry here in Jackson County. And of course, that's what looks like today. It's been cleaned up a little bit. The owners of it are trying to restore it and make it into a recycling business. But the demise of Buckhorn Creamery came in 1962 when it got purchased by and merged into Mississippi Valley Milk Producers Association, and a new plant was built here in Maquoketa, which is just down a few blocks away from where we're sitting. And that's what it looked like in 1964. And you can see the sign, NVMPA, which you'll see it much better on this bag. They made powdered milk whey.
Sorry, I didn't do a good job.
I found this just a few days ago in the museum inside the butter churn. And this bag is probably the last existing bag that ever was produced for Mississippi Valley Milk Producers. I found that very amusing as well. And that dairy, there's a picture of the bag. Eventually was bought, excuse me, Mississippi Valley Producers became Swiss Valley Farms in 1980. And it continued to be in business until the early 2000s. And today you would know it as what is merged again to Prairie Farms out of Carlinville, Illinois. There is no Swiss Valley remaining today, except for the fact that I found these coffee cups today here in our brown bag lunch, and you'll never find them ever again once they're gone. That gives me a chance to get a drink. And there's the buildings of what was Swiss Valley, what they look like today. In another business has bought them. I think it's a fertilizer business. Still there. So let's go back to Hans Jorgensen, Hans Scott, as they were not only farmers, they were quite well-to-do businessmen, because as you see in this picture, that they were both, or at least, this is from Pat Gent, from the picture, it's not very clear, but Hans Jorgensen was on the board of directors of the Baldwin Bank. And that's a position that you don't take lightly in 1920. Hans Jorgensen was farming 1 mile east of Baldwin at the time he was shipping milk to Buckhorn Creamery, but he struck a mindset where he thought his Guernsey milk was more valuable than just to make into butter. And he sold his herd of cows at that auction in 1941. And you can see what it says on the caliber. I cannot find the exact location in Baldwin where that farm was at, but it's in that part of the map. And he sold all but 30 head of young cattle to restock his newly purchased farm on the west edge of Maquoketa. And you can see his name right here. And this area, Mr. Jones, was what we knew as the Tubbs Orchard. It was right across the road. And here's a picture of the barn that he bought, and it tells that Hans Jorgensen was 4 miles west of Maquoketa. Well, that's an overstatement because it's only a mile from Maquoketa. And he got his name twice in the paper because at the bottom it reads, the herd of 26 Guernsey milk cows rate among the top dairy herds in Jackson County. He also owns 80 acres of Jackson County farmland. So I just love reading old newspapers. You get to feel the character of who they are, what they meant to be. And this is the overhead picture of what the dairy grew into. And the L-shaped building in the center of the picture is the dairy processing plant where they made milk, chocolate milk, and other products they did with their home Guernsey milk. As well as he had such a market started, he had to purchase milk from other dairy farmers to continue the increase of his business and sales. There you can see, again, the cans that brought the milk over and into their facility. And I'm going to take the time to read this that I found in the 1946 newspaper. Dairymen have a lot more to do than just drive around in the early morning breeze and put bottles of milk on every doorstep. And don't believe it, drive but to Jorgensen's Dairy someday and watch what goes on. Jorgensen's located in the southwest part of the city, the Folkada Sales Company, and east of Rosemere Farm. Actually, the milking is only part of the work connected with the process of putting milk in the consumable form. In a modern dairy today, the milk must be pasteurized at a temperature of 143 degrees. Following this, it is cooled down to less than 40 degrees and bottled. All of this is done to ensure that it's still at a temperature of not more than 50 degrees when it is left at your doorstep. At Jorgensen's, there is a special and concrete building where the milk is pasteurized, cooled, bottled, and stored in refrigerated lockers ready for the delivery of milk trucks. The entire process is done by a series of machines so that at no time do human hands touch the milk. In the barn, of course, a milking machine is used on the 30 top Guernsey cows in production. And additional milk is secured from 7 other state-inspected herds near Maquoketa. And most of these herds are comprised of Guernseys. Milk from the other dairies is delivered at Jorgensen's pasteurization plant by 7:30 a.m. in the morning. Some of the milk from the evening milking is used for cream, and some of it is cooled for milk delivered the first following morning day. During the war, Hans Jorgensen and his son Elvin were forced to run both the dairy and the farm with little help from any time. Things have bettered up in this respect the last few months. Pete Potter is acting as a herdsman and handles the milking machines. Enoch Wells handles the delivery on the retail route. Bill Hafner, who has been taking over the wholesale deliveries to local stores, he has left to go to college, but Mr. Jorgensen is anticipating a replacement. Here in Iowa, food is something we have always taken pretty much for granted, especially milk and cream. It is supposed to be on the doorstep whenever we step out to look for it. However, few realize all the trouble it takes to convert grass, hay, silage, minerals, and crops into something which we all humans can drink. That was dairying in a heartbeat for me to read that. It's so true yet today. And of course he was very proud of that his milk was all pasteurized and now was available in chocolate milk pints and quart. A couple more ads. Jorgensen's is your only local dairy. Give you regular, courteous door delivery service. The milk is from tested, inspected sanitary dairies and is processed in the Golden Mellow plant at Clinton. And promoting milk is to promote your health. Everybody needs milk. And so here is a picture of Arlene Jorgensen, who happens to be the mother of Linda McCoy, who is here with us today. And it's a neat picture because it shows there was a sign out at the road for Jorgensen Dairy. And I found a picture of them online, except we're very special here today that we actually have a leftover bottle of milk from the Jorgensen's Dairy that you can read. And so it's very special that they have this to represent Jorgensen's Dairy now in the museum. So at the end of this, anybody wants to take, it's good, fresh milk, given today from Jan Feddersen, brought it from Quick Trip here in Maquoketa, and it will be gone by the end of the day. Here you can see the vehicles they use to deliver the milk through Maquoketa and other communities. Again, it's Arlene, and Cordella Jorgensen is the aunt that was associated with the dairy. Another picture of the same facilities at a different time when it was owned by a Coeur dairy farm. I believe that was before they moved and bought that, but I'm not sure. But I believe it is. Then in November 7th of '46, they decided to sell the dairy and get out of the processing business, as far as I know. Now that date is also special in my heart because November 7th of 1981 is when I got married.
Is that a good thing or bad?
I won't. Don't make me blush. Yes, of course. You can see in later years that big beautiful dairy barn was eventually tore down and is no longer there. Because Elvin Jorgensen, the son and wife, went into the carpentering business or home building business, and they built this beautiful home. 1959 maybe. But this home should still be in Maquoketa somewhere.
Probably more like 51 or
51, okay.
I think so too.
Okay. So here is the two proprietors of the dairy. Sophie and Hans Jorgensen started it with their sons. And this is Linda's parents. And I just, again, basically for the pictures and the obituaries themselves, I won't read them. But they're here. But I did come across this picture in Ancestry trying to look up their family, and I'm not doing this for genealogy, but I'm doing it because this picture was taken in Denmark, which we are associated with pictures here in America. They too had cameras and the ability to take photos in Europe, and I thought that was pretty cool. And there's Linda's mom and dad's obituaries. But there again, Arlene Jorgensen was Arlene Lutt. And Arlene's grandfather was the Lutt that was in the old vehicle. So it all again goes back to Buckhorn Creamery. But also I wanted to add on, as you can read, Arlene and her husband Elvin owned the Jorgensen and Son Dairy for 8 years. Then she worked at Clinton Engine, right here. She worked right here. And then she worked at the Super Value Market. For 5 years she spent slicing and wrapping her baked goods. Mel Crone, maybe some of you know who that is, promoted her to head baker. And so she was well recognized in the community.
Sir? So August Lutt? would
Yeah,
be
August Lutt.
Our great-grandfather.
Oh,
Good. Good. That's what I couldn't remember. August Lutt. So again, he's pictured back there as August Lutt. Let's see. so again, here's the story about it. You know, we read that one. This is, I've labeled it. That's Frank. That's Frank Myatt. And he was the president of the Buckhorn Creamery, but he was a very well-to-do person because as you can see in 1900, he had this beautiful home just north of Elwood. So Frank Worth, see that Frank Worth had it. And Frank Worth's wife was Louise Moore. Louise Moore came from Lost Nation. That's Hans Moore and Christine Bush's daughter. And that all relates back to Ruth Wilson's family in the Moores. And then we come to the story of Harold Hayes. And Harold Hayes married Lola Worth, Frank Worth's daughter, Leroy's sister. But what I found interesting just here is that after they were married and he got to go to service, he was captured in Germany for 10 months, never to come back. Didn't know what his future was, but he did make it home. And Harold Hayes began a dairy farm somewhere south of Preston, maybe. And he decided with his brother to start the Hayes Dairy, which was in Maquoketa, which would have been across the street from Mitchell Mass Street today, just down the street a few blocks. And again, article here at the time, Jackson State Bank said it was a good place to do business in Maquoketa, and the Hayes brothers then had the only home-owned dairy, and they sold all these products. And they went out advertising again to produce more product. They needed more milk than they could produce, and they went out and procured milk from other farms. And they also started with other dairies, the Eastern Iowa Dairy Products Association, so where they knew they could get quality milk from the farms of this area. Sanitary dairies took over the plant of the Jorgensens, and they operated it sometime through the mid-60s. The sanitary dairies were in Maquoketa and in Clinton, and we came across this gallon milk jug. I didn't take the time to fill it with milk, as you pretty much can see. But when I was a little boy, and I went to school in kindergarten and first grade in Charlotte, and our milk came in little cartons of milk. And I remember taking my straw and poking the hole. It was a perforated hole to put your straw in, and I thought it was so cool to blow bubbles and the milk would come out the hole. That was sanitary dairy. And we moved to Lost Nation. I was disappointed to learn that their milk cartons didn't have that hole. Next one. So now I was hoping that this family, somebody might have showed up.
Oh.
This was for the Hayes Dairy, and the family belongs to Robert Melvold. And Doug Melvold comes to Brown Bag Lunches occasionally. I was hoping he was here to see that he was enjoying milk that came from the Hayes Dairy that raised his family and his siblings. Remember to drink 3 glasses of milk every day. And you can see this was a picture of the Hayes Dairy bottle that was available to buy online somewhere. And of course, I don't need to buy it, I just take a picture of it. So there's another bottle. And Hayes Dairy branched out not only in milk sales, but they also chose to produce ice cream. And they advertised their ice cream on their milk bottles. And of course you get all kinds of ads. These were from Hayes Dairy. And wanted to make sure that the youngest of the children received good, fresh, wholesome, pasteurized milk from the Hayes Dairy. These were the men that worked at the dairy. I'm sorry about the picture, but I can read. Jack Kellenberger, John Kaufman, Harville Weinshank, and Gerald Schweckel kept the products of the Hayes Dairy coming to the consumer. And then Eastern Iowa Dairyland Products had an open house. Again, that's where other dairies commingled their milk to get it to the dairies that needed it to make their products. And that was located south of Maquoketa on Highway 61. And of course, June is Dairy Month, and I was barely 1 year old when this paper was printed, but June Dairy Month was started many years ago, even before I was born. Hayes Dairy proudly salutes the dairy farmers and the dairy industry for their efforts to produce better dairy products. We at Hayes Dairy sell only grade A pasteurized, homogenized milk, and you'll find our products at your favorite store, or we will deliver them to you. Eastern Iowa Products, they made butter twirls and cottage cheese baskets.
What's the difference between pasteurized and homogenized?
Pasteurization kills the pathogens that would be found in milk. Homogenization takes the cream or the butter that's in milk, emulsifies it so it doesn't float to the top of your bottle. And here I have the obituaries for Harold Hayes and Lola. Again, Lola was, where did I read that at? She was, my helper was going to help me with this. This was Lola Worth, whose mother was Louise Moore. Again, in that same line of families who enjoyed the dairy industry for so long. I couldn't find anything about Robert Hayes, the younger brother, but this is, he's buried in Watertown, South Dakota. Then we turn to our last story, that I found this on a genealogy site done by Ken Wright for the man named Ed Kirchhoff. And I just brought this up. Ed Kirchhoff operated the ice cream business and also a cold storage locker. Well, his original business was cutting ice off of the waters behind Lakehurst Dam. And as that business came to an end because of refrigeration, he opened up a dairy here in Maquoketa to produce ice cream from the refrigeration available at the time. And he grew his business into what we know as Kirchhoff Dairy and Kirchhoff Distributing here in Maquoketa. And I remember that building too. And it had the name on the top of the very peak of that roof of that building.
Where was that at in Maquoketa?
Across the bill.
Yeah.
Across the street from the bill.
Bill's?
So again, there were pictures of Kirchhoff bottles of milk available online. So we had 3 dairies that all produced milk and had routes in the city of Maquoketa. Safeguard your health, that's because we talk about pasteurization. I will get into more discussion about that process in my next video presentation about the dairy farms of Maquoketa why their milk had to be pasteurized. If any of you remember the term undulant fever, it was caused because of brucellosis in the dairy herd, was passed on to humans, and was a very deadly disease. And that's why we pasteurize milk. I found online a Kirchhoff relative displayed this very nicely as a remembrance to the Kirchhoff business. And so he has his milk bottle, the milk can, the dairy cows, and he's also a John Deere enthusiast, so I would eat that right up too. And Kirchhoff Distributing was founded in 1915 by Ed Kirchhoff. Was the harvest and storage of ice, soon branched out to manufacturing ice cream. At the end of Prohibition, he obtained his wholesale beer license, making it the oldest beer wholesaler in the state of Iowa. Ed Kirchhoff forged a relationship with Anheuser-Busch, and from there, that relationship evolved, continued to where we are today. His son Robert acquired the family business in the 70s. Ron purchased it from his father, and they have a new facility still in Dubuque on Chavanel Road in Dubuque, and they also have a distributorship in Cedar Rapids. And Ed Kirchhoff's wife had passed away quite a few years earlier.
Oh, I think it was in the early 60s. I grew up at Miles. Part of this, Ron Kirchhoff, his dad, bought a farm just north of us, I guess, doesn't matter. And my mother made the comment, anybody in the Kirchhoff family didn't need to go farming. They had this business.
Sure.
They were a good addition to Miles, though, all very good students.
So, in his later years, Ed Kirchhoff was a very well-known philanthropist here in Maquoketa.
Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame. So, I find that very, very neat. And I found a couple pictures here. That's probably the picture you have in the museum of Ed Kirchhoff. And this picture, when I was growing up, I knew the Tiltons because they ran the music shop here in Maquoketa and was very good friends with our music instructor in Lost Nation. So I found that to be a memory for me as well.
Ray, Ed Kirchhoff also lost his son in World War II, and our outside swimming pool was dedicated, and they helped pay for that.
Cool. Cool. So there's a lot of history here.
Yes,
But as he forged his business with Anheuser-Busch, he became very popular in selling Budweiser. So now, if any of you ever had the chance to hear the Budweiser Clydesdales, you get to hear it today.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching 8 Tons of Champions right here. The beautifully nice 8-horse hitch from Anheuser-Busch.
So as I conclude this, even though everybody likes to drink an occasional beer, please don't forget to drink your milk. These producers and dairymen, in that year this was printed in '56, a few weeks before I was born, were already telling everybody to drink their fair share of milk. And so, at the end of this, again, I found this very fitting tribute that's in the back of one of these books. Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. And that came from an Indian or Native American. So that's pretty special.
I have a comment, right? If most of us are probably of the age where we can remember from Kirchhoff's weddings when they just had cake and ice cream and you get the blocks of ice cream that had the colored bell
Yeah.
through. That's where they came
That's
from,
right.
Kirchhoff's, and then the bell would be whatever color of the wedding and that. But that
Cool.
was very
I'd
common
forgotten
years
that.
ago.
Norma graduated with a Kirchhoff, didn't you?
Yes, I
With Derek?
graduated
Yeah.
on the Kirchhoff's.
Roger.
When I was a little boy, we separated the milk, cream, and then sold the cream. Why did we, they make something special with
Didn't have to haul the water. They separated the whey so you could feed that at home to your own hogs,
Yes,
right?
you
And you
gave that to the hogs.
And you took the cream to go make butter. And it was easier to transport 10 pounds of butter than it was to haul a 100-pound can of milk. What that was all about.
The other story I'll tell about is we had a cream separator in a cream house, and you screwed the top down, and there were different pieces of it. And one day when my mom and I were out there, we didn't get the top screw down, and we turned on the electricity, and it all exploded.
I did read one part why they went away from separating the milk and the cream was because of that reason. The cream would tend to get dirty or sour before it got to the cheese plant. It was fresher to keep it cold in a milk can and get it delivered every other day. So it was a quality issue to keep the food healthy. And so with that, I'm going to leave you one more video here. It's an encore to the first song, the second song you heard. remakes of,
73, 2 years old.
on the Branson Theater of, can't remember. Just had it on the tip of my tongue. I can't.